Welcome to episode 63 of the Gambots podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and this is my co-host.
It's Christian.
On this week's episode, Christian and I are going to be talking about the newly released Sonic. We are going to be talking about the Netflix Original Dolemite Is My Name, and I finally platinumed Bloodborne, so I will be talking about that for a little bit. But first, Christian, you and I both watched Sonic. I was a little bit surprised by this one. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I was also pretty surprised. After everything that this movie went through, it was pretty good.
Yeah, and so for our audience who doesn't remember, Christian and I were not very kind to this movie when the original poster was released and then when the original trailer came out because they chose to do a weird, sort of realistic-looking anthropomorphic Sonic that had very pronounced teeth and human eyes, and it just looked terrifying. And so the studio spent millions of dollars to rework all of the Sonic animations and fix some of the lighting choices they had made, and they made the right call. Sonic looks normal, he's not distracting, and this movie is not bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we were pretty harsh. Even on the redesign, it was kind of like, I don't know about this, but it exceeded my expectations.
It really did. And one question I definitely remember talking about when we spoke about the trailers and everything before was we had no idea who this movie was for because no one was really asking for a Sonic movie. And pretty early on, I think we get our answer that this movie is definitely directed towards kids.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's fun in like a kid's way, kind of. It's not. It's definitely not like adults' humor, and like not even like inappropriate humor, but like it's not funny for an adult audience. It's definitely more of like a slapstick, like fart joke kind of humor.
Right, and the story is pretty simplistic. I think it's a story that kids can understand. Sonic is alone, and he's just trying to find a family he wants to be with, you know. And I think that's something that a lot of kids can sympathize with, of feeling like an outcast. But this begs my original question with how they designed Sonic at first was, I can't believe that they thought that was a good design for a children's movie because the original Sonic was not something kids would want to like play with. It was terrifying.
Oh my god, I know.
So whoever made that choice, just real questionable. Okay, so the other big draw of this movie, other than it being a Sonic movie, is that Jim Carrey plays the main villain in this, Dr. Robotnik, which I finally learned the origins of his name, Eggman. I never actually knew that. I thought it was like the Mario originally being King Koopa and then Bowser. It was, you know, some weird thing like that. And it was, he's Eggman because he has egg-shaped robots.
Yeah, I was never really clear on where that transition took place.
I wasn't either. I'm not particularly well versed in the Sonic lore.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Jim Carrey? Because he is by far the biggest name attached to this.
He was every Jim Carrey he's ever been in any movie all at once. And at times it was too much.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I do not particularly care for Jim Carrey. I think I spoke about that when we talked about the documentary of him making Man on the Moon. I think I don't like his brand of comedy for the most part. And I will say during this, I was very aware that I was watching Jim Carrey be Dr. Robotnik. But I think he played a good egomaniac, which I wonder why that is. I think Jim Carrey might be a bit of an egomaniac himself. And I liked his take on Dr. Robotnik of just being the smartest person in the world, extremely arrogant. Like, I thought that was good. Some of the humor didn't land for me, but my favorite part of him was the dancing scene while he was trying to analyze Sonic's quill.
Yeah, like there were definitely moments when I enjoyed him on screen, but for the most part it was just like aggressively obnoxious.
Right. And I want to give a bit of a spoiler warning here, I guess, because this movie is still relatively new. I actually really liked how at the beginning of this, like, he doesn't look like the traditional Dr. Robotnik, but then by the end, at the post-credit scene you get, it like makes way more sense. And I like that transition of you seeing like the origin stories of him going even more crazy.
I did also really like that. It was because I don't really remember what he looked like. I remember like the iconic kind of mustache, but beyond that, I didn't really have a firm memory of what Robotnik and Egghead looked like. And yeah, seeing that at the end, that was very neat to be like, oh, there it is.
Yeah. And so some other names attached to this. This starred Ben Schwartz, who did the voice of Sonic. He's a pretty big name, but he isn't actually starring. He's just doing voiceover. Tika Sumpter, and then the other big name is James Marsden. I'm curious, what did you think of James Marsden's performance on this?
I liked it. It was, it was fine. He was like a goofy, like hokey sheriff. I did see a screenshot somewhere on Twitter, I think, of two shots, one from Sonic and one from the movie Hop, which came out like 5 or 6 years ago, where he's best friends with the Easter Bunny, and it was almost the exact same shot. It was just James Marsden in the driver's seat, chauffeuring around like a CGI animal. I was like, oh, he's found his niche.
Yeah, kids movies. I thought he was fine. Like, it totally seemed like he was playing the appropriate role for a kids movie, but at times I felt like he wasn't trying. His character, and I guess it was his wife, I'm not sure if Tika Sumpter was his wife or his girlfriend or fiance or whatever, they were like they were not bothered by any life-threatening situation that went on. They met
not remotely.
No, they met Sonic and they freaked out, and then there were multiple times when the government or Dr. Robotnik had missiles shooting at them, and they're just giving these quips or like, oh yeah, we don't care at all. And it was just like, man, I don't know. I thought that was a weird choice to go with that. Like, they showed no fear ever.
Yeah, it's true. I did like the handling of the sister-in-law. I thought that was entertaining.
Oh, I think there were some genuinely funny moments in this. I thought the sister-in-law hating on him was hilarious, but it made no sense why she started hating on him from the beginning. Like, the first scene, she's telling her sister to get a divorce. I can get after the fact when he's considered a terrorist, but before that, she just hated him.
Yep.
There were a couple other scenes I liked in this a lot. I like the opening scene of Sonic talking about the town and how everyone, he's part of everyone. They just don't know he's there. So it's like kind of sad, but also kind of funny because you're always seeing him in the background. Mm-hmm. And I really liked when he was trying to become Marsden's best friend, and he's just basically arguing with the dog. I thought that was good.
I liked the guy that everyone thought was crazy, and I liked the fact that he was like an urban myth.
Yeah.
That they called Sonic the Blue Devil, and he was like their own little like Bigfoot that nobody really thought he was real, but this one crazy guy is trying to capture him, and he's yelling into the woods like, I know you're real, and you hear Sonic's voice come back like, no, I'm not.
Yeah. So that
I thought was cute. It was darker than I was expecting for like a kid's movie. Like, as lighthearted as it was, like Sonic's, I don't know, owl mother is murdered like immediately.
Oh yeah, there's some.
And then
sorry,
he has this weird, dark, like depressing situation where, like you said, like he's like injected himself into everyone's life, but only as like a fantasy because they don't know he's there, and so he's dealing with this like isolation and loneliness, and like it was a little heavy right at the beginning.
It was, and so there's a little bit of this story which doesn't make a ton of sense to me from Sonic lore. So I'm curious because clearly they set up a sequel on this. Like, why? So, number one, it seemed like the Echidnas, which are Knuckles' tribe from Sonic and Knuckles, was trying to kill Sonic from the very beginning, which I believe in their lore, like in the game lore, the Echidnas guard the Chaos Emeralds, and it doesn't seem like Sonic has a Chaos Emerald, so I don't know why they'd be going after him.
Yeah, I don't know. I had spoken to somebody who had said that he would have liked if when you see Jim Carrey transitioning into his like full bad guy at the end there, that like he would have picked up a rock or something and there would have been like a green glow or something that kind of foreshadowed the Chaos Emeralds in almost like an MCU kind of way. I like that would have been a cool opportunity to really start to like, grow the universe.
Yeah, and so that also brings up my point of I don't understand why everyone was going after him, because Sonic's fast, that's his thing, and then if he goes fast enough, it seems like he has unlimited energy. But when he was a kid and everyone attacked him, he did not seem to be exhibiting that, and he seemed to be going as fast as Tails goes at the end.
Yeah, I'm not really clear on a lot of stuff in this movie. Like that's what I mean when I say it's more of like a kiddie movie, whereas big chunks of it I think don't really hold up under even the most cursory of scrutiny. Like everything's gonna start to fall apart. It's gonna be full of plot holes. This is definitely a movie you go to be like, ha, that crazy hedgehog. Don't think too much about this.
Right. So there was one recurring joke that was so blatant, I actually thought it was hilarious, and that was the Olive Garden branding.
Yeah, so there's a lot of branding in this movie. I was trying to remember what it was. Olive Garden was definitely a big one. There were a couple others, though, and I was wondering if it was, like, this is how they paid for the redesign.
They're like, look, Olive Garden, if you give us $2 million, we will say in a line, thanks for the gift card. I love their endless soup and salad bowls, because they literally said something from a commercial as a line.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I was really wondering if that's how they paid for their complete character revamp, because God knows that had to have been expensive, and it's not a cost that they were planning on from the jump.
No, that would be amazing if that's what they did, though.
Like, it was as bad in certain places as... Did you ever watch the TV show Chuck? That was on for a
I've
while,
seen a couple
about the
episodes
spy?
of it, but I never watched it, like,
As time
thoroughly.
went on, they were very blatantly running out of money, and so almost, like, full episodes would turn into commercials for, like, Subway and Ford. It got real strange.
That's so odd.
Yeah, like they go camping at a certain point, and they're in the car driving up the mountain, and Chuck is like, I really like this car, and the guy driving is like, oh yeah, it's whatever, like a Ford Explorer, and it gets this much gas mileage, and check out this heads-up display on the dashboard that tells me how economically I'm driving, and you're like, oh wow.
He's like, look, sunroof optional.
Yeah, it really gets wild from time to time.
That's crazy. So before we finish up talking about this, I wanted to point out some of the Easter eggs that I noticed in this. And I was curious if you noticed anything else, but I noticed some of the music was orchestral versions of either Sonic songs or like the Sega Genesis theme opening.
Yep. Yeah, I had walked into this and I told I told Adrian, who was working at the time, I said, if I watch this whole movie and I don't hear the Green Hill Zone theme, I'm going to burn this building to the ground. And I waited till the end, and it is in one of the last scenes. As like you said, it's like an orchestral arrangement while they were like repainting the house of the original Green Hill Zone theme song. So I was happy. I didn't have to light any fires.
Yeah, that was good. The opening area is Green Hills, Montana, which is a reference to the Green Hill Zone, which is the first Sonic level. Knuckles' Echidna tribe is there. The biggest one that I noticed that I was actually proud of noticing, every time Sonic took any sort of damage, he dropped his bag of rings.
That is not something I noticed, but that's amazing.
I'm pretty sure every time like that he actually took a real hit, he dropped his rings. The only one maybe not is when the explosion happened. I can't remember, But when like the Robotnik fight and stuff, like he dropped his rings a couple times. When he got shot, dropped the rings.
That's outstanding.
So I hope they did that on purpose. The ending battle with Robotnik's robot was very reminiscent of those boss battles as well.
Oh yeah,
which was cool because they like made the sound effects and stuff. He's bouncing off of it.
Yeah, jumping off the landscape and like bopping the top, like that's exactly how it goes in that original game.
Yeah, and then he eats chili dogs in the bar fight scene, which is a reference, I think, to the original like '90s cartoon.
Yeah, see, I never watched the cartoon.
Okay, yeah, I like that cartoon a lot. I didn't like the second take on it, where it was like a darker version and there were more characters. But yeah, the first, like the original one, was awesome.
Well, my question for you is, we know we're getting. I hope we're getting a sequel. The money it made, I think, would warrant one. But they definitely tried to throw it to a sequel at the end. I guess my question is, who do you want to show up from like the Sonic games?
That's tough because I don't follow Sonic lore that much. Like my heyday as Sonic was Sonic 2, and then I played Sonic and Knuckles. I didn't realize Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles were a combined deal until years later, like probably like 5 years ago, when I watched a YouTube video on it. So I don't know their universe that well. I would probably go with Knuckles. I always liked playing as him. I know in the later games, especially the 3D ones, he takes on a different stance of being like a power character, but I always thought he was fun because he could climb walls.
Yeah, I was always a big Knuckles fan in the game because, like you said, you can climb and you can glide a little bit, and that was always fun. I wouldn't mind seeing Shadow.
Yeah,
I like the Shadow character a lot. I did. Oh, hell, what was I about to say? Oh, I did like in the original Genesis games, Sonic and Knuckles had an additional port on top of the cartridge that you could plug other Sonic games into and then play the older games as Knuckles.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I know you could play games in and get like special warp zone levels. I didn't know you could do Knuckles in old games though.
Yeah, you could. I think it was Sonic 2. You could stick Sonic 2 on top of Sonic and Knuckles, and it let you play Sonic 2 as Knuckles. And that was the only way to reach certain areas, was because he had that glide ability. You couldn't reach it with Sonic.
Oh, that's really cool. Good to know. All right, Christian, we both seem to have liked this movie. Do you know what the critics are saying about it?
So, critic score shockingly is 63%. That's so much higher than I expected it to be from them. Audience score is a 94%. That's also higher than I expected it to be from the audience, but not as surprising.
Right, and you had alluded to this, but this budget was somewhere between 81 and 95 million, and the box office so far is 203 million, and it's only been out for maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's done really, really well for itself.
Yeah, they made the right call on switching the animation, because I don't think it does this well without the redoing it.
No. And at least opening weekend at our theater, it didn't do super amazing, and I think on its second week it got a real boost from word of mouth. Because I feel like a lot of people felt the way we did, where they were kind of going into it apprehensive about what kind of a nightmare might be waiting for them inside.
Yeah. So, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially you got kids, you want to take them to see something like wacky. It is a movie that your kids will really enjoy, and you will, I think, not hate.
Yes. I'm a little bit torn on this one. I will definitely say it's a kids movie, so if you're not wanting that, don't go see this. I actually think Sonic works better as a kids movie and like trying to be like a fun, lighthearted character than he does as an edgy character. That's kind of what took me away from the Sonic series. Is I think they leaned a little bit too hard into that once they got into the 3D game. So I'm glad they pulled back on that. And I'm actually surprised. I thought originally this would work better as a fully animated movie. I think they made the right call of doing live action with animated characters. They handled that well. So overall, if you're a Sonic fan, I'd say check it out. Otherwise, I think this is one you could probably wait to stream. Also this week, Christian, we watched the Netflix original Dolemite is My Name. So Dolomite is basically the biography of Rudy Ray Moore, who is a comedian from the 70s who went from being basically a record store clerk to a nationally acclaimed comedian to a movie star. And this follows his journey of grinding from every point him becoming basically having national fame for being in a movie starring his titular character that he created, Dolemite. So did you like this movie?
Yeah, it wasn't like 100% my cup of tea, but I still found it entertaining.
You know, I went into this blind. I had no idea what this movie was when you talked about it last week, and I loved this movie. This was like right up my alley of watching the biography of someone grinding and just succeeding. Like I really was impressed with this movie.
Yeah, it was cool. I went into it mostly blind too. I know it had received a lot of praise online. It hadn't received many actual like accolades, though. It won a couple things, maybe at the Golden Globes, but I know this had been listed as something that had gotten like a snub at the Academy Awards, and so I was interested to dive in and check it out.
Yes. So this is directed by Craig Brewer, and it mostly stars Eddie Murphy, but then it also has Divine Joy Randolph, Keegan-Michael Key, Mike Epps, Craig Robinson, Titus Burgess, and Wesley Snipes is also in it. So it's a pretty solid cast they've had for this.
Yeah, and I mean, God knows, I will never not love Craig Robinson in anything. I saw on your notes here, anytime he walked out to sing, all you were thinking of was Doug Judy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'm 100%
Right.
with you on that. He walked out on that stage, and I kept waiting for him. It was like the cruise ship episode where he's on that stage doing lounge music. I love Craig Robinson.
Oh, he's great. I mean, everyone is actually really good in this. First off, I was blown away by Eddie Murphy's performance. I don't even know the last thing I have seen him in, but he crushed this role.
Yeah, I had to go back through his IMDb just like bit by bit chronologically, and the last movie I can honestly say that I saw, or at least the most recent movie I can see that I saw with him as a credit, was Shrek 2 in 2004. Where I actually saw him live on screen would have been in Daddy Day Camp in 2003. So it's been a long time since I had Eddie Murphy in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on animated would probably be Shrek 2 or Shrek 3. But last time I can remember seeing him live was Dr. Dolittle.
It's been a long time.
It's been a while. I also got to say, this takes place in the 70s. I love the music that they worked with on this. It was all great 70s music, and I love the 70s aesthetic.
Yeah, I could absolutely have no trouble believing that this movie took place concurrently with The Nice Guys.
Oh, for sure, man. That would be great if they were in the same cinematic universe.
Yeah, like, it would be just outstanding to like get like a little bit of a recut of Nice Guys, where sometime when they're in the car and you hear like a Dolomite track come on the radio for a minute or two, like that. I would have no trouble seeing these two films interacting with each other.
Yeah, and also, how underrated is The Nice Guys?
Underrated. One of the best movies of the year when it came out. I absolutely adore that movie.
Yeah. All right, so we should probably talk more about Dolomite. But yeah, so I actually really like that they showed every aspect of his career, from no one really liking his music career, so he pivoted to being a comedian. No one liking his material until he found, a shtick that worked. He created this character. He's grinding. He's going across the country. He's basically betting on himself, building a brand, and then once again bets on himself to make a movie that no one thinks will succeed. And I like seeing every stage of that process. But this movie has a lot of montages.
It really does.
There is a 10-minute montage in the middle of this that's broken up by maybe a 2-minute scene of Queen Bee punching her husband.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the montage of him like blowing up was very fun. It was cool to see him like selling records out of the back of his car and like starting to put his brand out there. It was cool. And like you said, the music in this is outstanding, and so it really was a great aesthetic.
Yeah. And another thing I liked about this, and I guess who knows if this is true or not, we're obviously seeing this from a story where they are saying Rudy Ray Moore is this way, but Eddie Murphy, how Eddie Murphy plays him, he seems like a legitimately nice guy. Like, he knows he's playing a character, he doesn't become egotistical, and all the scenes we see him in, he's paying everyone who's helping him. He's not trying to shortchange anyone. He's putting up all his own money, and then at the very end, once he finally gets his premiere, he doesn't even go to it. He hangs out with the crowd because not everyone can get in. And he's like, well, they came to see this. I want to make sure they're entertained. Like, he seems like a good dude.
Yeah, I was wondering if this was like, I didn't know how serious of a movie this was. Like we both said, we kind of went in blind. I was wondering if this was going to turn into one of those where, like, as time goes on, he starts to like bleed into the character, and he has trouble separating Rudy from Dolemite. But yeah, like that conversation where he first meets Queen Bee, where they have that conversation at the bar, and he's like, hey man, like, I'm wearing a wig, I'm not really a pimp, this is all a character, like, this is all made up, I'm just doing this to make money and sell records, and like, that's not who I am at the end of the day. And like, oh cool, that was like, it's very self-aware.
Right. And I hope the guy really was like that, because I don't feel like you hear those stories too much about people who become famous. They usually sound like they become kind of jerks. So this movie is like, there's a lot going on in this movie, because we go from him like being a comedy act to basically them making like a behind the scenes of making a movie in the 70s. So like, this juxtaposed hard with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because they're both in the 70s and they're both about making movies. And I gotta say, I like this better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that one. Maybe I'll have to give it a look, and so I can compare and contrast a little bit. I gotta say,
but
yeah, go ahead.
No, you.
I gotta say, I think my favorite character in this may have been his aunt, and she was only in like 5 minutes of this movie.
Oh, oh yeah. Do you think the do you think the Bill Cosby scene was intentional?
It was. I mean, I don't know exactly when this movie was made, but it had to have been after everything. Like, it was such a funny like call out of like, I mean, yeah, we're in the 70s, we don't know any better, but the audience does now. And his aunt's like, oh, I hope you make a comedy album like that cute little Bill Cosby. He's so sweet. And I was sitting there like, oh no.
Yeah, I did think that dig was kind of funny, especially because I'm sure Eddie Murphy growing up was always had to deal with Bill Cosby comparisons, or even Rudy Ray Moore, where they're like, you're too dirty, why can't you be have nice comedy like Bill Cosby? And it's like, well, it turns out even if you have a foul mouth, like, you can be a much better person than someone else. But also, did you get any feel of, when they're making the movie, that this was also kind of like another take on the 70s version of The Disaster Artist, where this movie did not seem like it should succeed?
Yeah, so I was definitely drawing parallels between this and The Room. Like, it just seemed like the environment was much different. Like, it's still just as crazy, and it's definitely a movie that succeeded, like, in spite of itself. But the way that the movie portrays the making of Dolemite, everybody there was having a great time, except maybe Wesley Snipes, who is
that guy
my
hated
second favorite
there.
character in this movie by a mile.
Dude, I honestly did not realize that was Wesley Snipes for longer than I care to admit.
Yeah, but like, everything I've read about the making of The Room, every single person there was just miserable. Like, nobody there wanted to be there. Nobody was having a good time. Like, it was kind of the nightmare scenario that you were kind of alluding to before, where, like, Tommy wasn't paying people, whereas, like, Rudy was making sure everybody was getting paid, even if they were working like a little overtime. Like, he always made sure they got their money, and Tommy absolutely was not that way. And so
yes, and the sex scene in Dolemite was not extremely awkward. It was actually funny versus with Tommy, where it was just bad.
It seems like, two movies where the end result is similar, but the getting there was as different as it could have possibly been. That sex scene was hilarious. Like I was interested in this movie when it first started. I was kind of glancing down at my phone a little more, and then when Keegan Michael Key and Wesley Snipes came into it and the actual movie making process started, that's when I feel like it really ramped up into like a much better movie for me.
Oh yeah, yep. And
The way Wesley Snipes just like groans cut after every scene. Something goes horribly wrong,
yeah.
and like he asked the director of photography at one point, is there any way you can shoot this so it looks believable? And the guy's like, no.
Not at
and
all.
so he sits there, he's like, cut.
I like I had never heard of this movie. I think they said they made 7 of them. I really want to watch this
Yeah,
movie
I mean
now.
they showed clips of the like actual movie right before or during those like the credit epilogue sequence at the end, and so it
Yeah.
was neat to see that like, oh yeah, this is pretty close to accurate, and like even that bedroom scene they actually brought the ceiling down on those people.
Yeah, man. And they blew up the one dude's like cousin's car.
Oh man.
All right, so you and I both clearly are fans of this, Christian. Do you know how this fared with the critics?
It really, really well. Like, critics gave this a 97%. Audience, not much below, gave it a 91%. Like I said at the beginning, this isn't really my cup of tea, especially at the beginning, but I did still really, really enjoy it, so those numbers don't really surprise me.
Yes, and we don't really have any budget information or box office because this is a Netflix movie, but I imagine it had to have. I'm guessing it's done relatively well. And I do want to say I really like this movie. I wish I had watched it in 2019 because it would have probably been. It's up of 2019 releases. It's up there with Peanut Butter Falcon as like my actual favorite movies released in 2019 that I watched. I really like this one. I think Eddie Murphy was a definite snub, and I'm going to now retcon my list of snubs from a previous episode. He did a better job than Adam Driver, and this was a better movie than Marriage Story and The Irishman. Like, this should have been nominated for an Oscar over those two.
Like as entertaining as this was, I had heard that buzz that this was going to be a snub, but I'm absolutely shocked this didn't get nominated in any categories. It could have
right. Like
it could have done Best Actor, it could have been Best Supporting Actress, it could have done cinematography, it could have done costume, it could have done picture. Like, this could have been nominated.
It had the same costumes as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like, it's the same era, and they chose
but
that
like a little crazier. Yeah, like I'm absolutely stunned this didn't get nominated in literally anything.
So for Best Pictures, I don't think this is probably better than Parasite. Maybe 1917, like, I thought was a good movie, but I could see how people would like that better. But comparing this to The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Marriage Story, I think this is better than all three of those.
It's certainly better than Joker.
Yeah, I forgot that one was definitely better than that too. So if anyone's wondering, I definitely suggest you check this out. What about you, Christian?
Yeah, I probably would too. I was recommending it to people at dinner tonight, so.
There's your answer.
Alright, so this week, the long-awaited, you finally platinumed Bloodborne. So, give me an idea. This is part of a series, correct?
Sort of. This is part of a series of games that have similar style of gameplay, and that starts with Demon Souls on the PlayStation 3, and then extends to Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and then Bloodborne, which is a PS4 exclusive. They don't follow the same exact story, but they have a lot of similar gameplay elements where you have a stamina bar for attacks. The level designs are generally very good, where you have to be careful going around. If you're not careful, enemies can kill you in 1 or 2 hits. So they share a similar DNA. They're all made by the same company, FromSoft, and so that's why they generally are referred to as Soulsborne games, because they're different, but they are more similar than they are different. They just don't share the same story. And Bloodborne is really set apart because Dark Souls and Demon Souls were focused on more of like a medieval fantasy, like knights style look. This one is Victorian horror and like H.P. Lovecraft style horror. So it definitely has a different style than the other games.
I gotta say, the only thing I really knew about Dark Souls was that it could be brutal when you get into battles. Like, hearing you say that, like, 1-2 hit kills is not surprising, considering what I've heard about these games.
Yes, and not only can you die quickly, the way you gain experience is when you kill enemies, you get, it's called souls, or blood echoes in Bloodborne. And it's not only your currency, that's your experience. And if you die, you have to make it back to where you died to pick those up, or if you die again, they go back to 0, which is annoying, and it can be very frustrating. But once you learn the level layouts and once you play the games a couple times, if you play the series a few times from the different games, they have the similar feel. You kind of get used to it, and it's actually not as bad as your initial playthrough is.
So are there any mechanics that they introduce in Bloodborne that are better than things in those previous games?
Yeah, so I think there is one thing that I like that they do better, hands down, than the other games. So in the other games, you can get backstabs on enemies. Think of it like Dungeons and Dragons. If you get a good backstab on someone, you get a surprise hit or a crit. It's basically a crit, right? On this one, in those games, if you got behind an enemy and got the attack right, you would just backstab them. They couldn't really defend against it without moving around, and you could chain backstab in Dark Souls 1, and it kind of broke the game. In this one, you have to do what's called a visceral attack, so you have to essentially get behind them and do a power charge attack, and then they fall to their knees, and then you can backstab them. So it's not just like you can keep walking around them and lock out. You actually have to take your time and hit a proper attack to get a backstab, which I think is better.
Yeah, that's cool. I do like the idea of having like advantage and stuff like that. I think you had said before that you had tried to get into this game previously and it didn't really click. Was there something that changed this time, or did you get past a certain like hurdle and it got better from there?
You know, that one's hard to say. So I tried this game back in probably 2016 because there's a lot of talk about it, and like I had mentioned previously, you can die quickly and then you lose your ability to progress, like your experience points. And so I think the first area's layout is good, but it's challenging because there's mobs of enemies, and I would get so far and then die, and it just became a slog, and I didn't like that. I eventually went back and platinum the first game in the entire Soulsborne series, Demon Souls, and then subsequently did Dark Souls and Dark Souls 3. So once I finally came back to this for a third try, I think I had gotten used to the formula, and once I had beaten the first boss, you're actually finally able to level up, which you weren't able to do beforehand. Once I was able to start doing that and having to not worry about losing all my progress, I started liking the game better, and then I got into the flow. And once you get into the flow of the game, it gets a lot easier.
Now, you had said, like, when I picture this game, I think of like a Sword and Sandals kind of Final Fantasy vibe, where it's just like knights kind of weapons. But you said Victorian. Is there like more than just kind of swords and stuff, or is there guns? What kind of actual like combat mechanic is there?
So the weapons in this game are very different than the rest of the series. So the other games, it's like medieval weapons. You have great swords, you have straight swords, those kind of things. This one, you have what are called trick weapons. And so when you're starting out, you can either pick a cane that turns into a chain whip, you can pick an axe that turns into a giant axe, or you can pick what they call a saw cleaver that you can change into, like, it has extended range. It's sort of like an axe. And then eventually you can get like a great sword, or there's this like mini sword that you can combine and then it turns into a giant hammer. You get a blade that can turn into 2 blades. So you get basically 2 sets of weapons with each one. And you can put those in one hand. Some of them are 2-handed. And then in the other hand, you do get a gun. You can get like a blunderbuss, a pistol, a repeating pistol, a flamethrower, like a bunch of random things. So it's definitely, you're feeling like it's Victorian-ish era because there are firearms in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I said last week, I do love the katana pistol combo.
Yes. Yeah, you can get a katana in this actually too. It's I think it's called the Chikage.
Well, I'm sold.
So another thing that I really like about this game, and I think what's a selling point of a lot of the Soulsborne games is the boss battles. And in this one, I thought they did a really good job of having a combination of both giant, horrendous monsters you're fighting, as well as humanoid-sized enemies. So it makes for quicker battles where you have to dodge and everything like that. So the boss battles in this are really good. Maybe the best in the entire series, just because there weren't very many gimmicky fights like there can be in the other games. And I will say that I think this is one of the least time-consuming platinums to get from the Soulsborne games, but I also think it's one of the hardest to get because you have to complete what's called the Chalice Dungeons.
All right, so what is a Chalice Dungeon?
So the Chalice Dungeons are basically set apart from the main game, and you unlock them by beating optional bosses, and they are procedurally generated dungeons that are harder than the main game. So in the main game, the enemy placement and like challenge is pretty well balanced, and the Chalice Dungeons, like if you think of it like D&D, you'll be fighting, if you're like a level 3 party, they'll put 2 challenge rating like level 2 monsters together or something, so it makes the fight that much harder because you have to pay attention, whereas in the normal game you're fighting maybe one of them.
So you say procedurally generated. Is that like how terrain is generated in Minecraft? Like the game just does it for you?
Right. So they procedurally generate different rooms that link together. And so you get to see a lot of the same rooms with different coverings, but you're not going to see the same rooms in every dungeon. And you'll go through, like, they're called layers. So you'll go through the layer. You have to find a thing to unlock the boss door, and then there's side paths so you can get some treasures. And then you fight a boss and you go down to another layer and do the same thing. And usually you have to get through 3 boss battles. And the Chalice Dungeons also have the hardest boss battles in the game. And, well, excluding the DLC. And then also the Chalice Dungeons can have extra things that make them hard. Like the worst one was called a Defiled Chalice, where your HP was halved. So things could one-shot you, so you had to try and play perfectly, which was challenge. That's why I say it's one of the most challenging ones. The Defiled Chalices were rough. I've never really summoned people to help with boss battles, but I had to summon someone to help me with one of the boss battles in the Chalice Dungeons because I kept getting one-shotted by this flaming dog. It was rough.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that the games can do stuff like that, just generate their own levels. Like, I couldn't go online right now and get a map of these dungeons because they're going to be different every time.
Right, and that's what's weird about it. So the ones you have to go through for the plat, actually, they are not procedurally generated. They are all the same, but everything else, like, you can unlock side things, and they're called, like, what are they called? They're called root dungeons, and those are, I guess, the more procedurally generated ones, but they advertise everything as being procedurally generated, but if you're, like, looking online for tips, the main ones are actually not. But the procedurally generated ones are what basically people are still playing, and they have hidden stuff in there that, like, never made it into the game. It's enemies that are nowhere else. Like, it's really interesting for people who love the game to just go in there and find stuff that didn't make the cut.
That's cool. So overall, where would you rate this game?
Rating this game's hard for me. I personally think this is an A game. Like, this is one of the best games of the PlayStation 4. There's a reason it gets a lot of praise, and it is good. I think the problem is that I don't think this game's going to appeal to everyone. Like, the Soulsborne formula, you have to be in a mood for. Like, this game stresses me out when I'm playing it. Like, you have to be hyper alert. You can't really veg out while playing it. And I don't think it's everyone's cup of tea. So, like, if you like the other Soulsborne games, you're definitely going to love this one. If you don't, it's one of those, like, where you have to just dip your toes into it. It's you can usually find it pretty cheap. It's on sales. It was actually a PS Plus game at 1.2. So it's definitely one you can try out. But this is one where I think you have to, if you want to get into it, you have to keep slamming your head against a wall until the game clicks with you. And then once it does, like, you get you get sucked into it. But if you never make it to the point where it clicks, I can see why people quit. It just can get frustrating.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
All right, guys, before we play our Amazon review game, I do want to do one correction from last week. Last week, I talked about the DC Universe, and I said that I was kind of disappointed with the Harley Quinn animated series. I gave it more time. I watched a few more episodes, and the cartoon is actually awesome. The first episode, I think, was the weakest, and it only got better from there. So I just wanted to give out... I wanted to retract what I said a little bit. It is actually a very good cartoon.
That's good.
Yes, it gets less gratuitously violent and less vulgar, and I think it's better for it. It's legitimately a funny take on the Batman universe.
I think there was a scene going around on my Twitter this week, and I think it may have been from this show, where the Joker finds out who Batman is.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't made it there yet. I'm like 7 of 13 episodes in.
I don't know if it was from this show or not, but the Joker's got Batman tied up, and he finds out it's Bruce Wayne, and then all he wants to do is complain because he submitted like an electric car design that Wayne Enterprises like rejected, and so all he wants to do is be like a disgruntled person coming at like Elon Musk, like, why didn't you take my ideas?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like this show. They go in weird directions, and they incorporate some random characters into it, and it's great.
Nice.
All right, guys, and now it's time for our Amazon review game. A quick recap on the rules if you forget. Christian is going to read me a 5-star Amazon review for a movie. I will get 2 yes or no questions to help me narrow down what the movie is. I can then ask for another review. I get 2 more yes or no questions. I can ask for a final review, 2 more yes or no questions, and then I have to guess the movie. We are keeping score this year. If I get it on one movie, I get 3 points, 2 points for 2 reviews, and 1 point for 3 reviews. Christian, I am ready when you are.
All right. Honestly, when I first saw the movie, I had no idea what I was in for. I hadn't read reviews or a synopsis. I hadn't even watched the trailer. To be frank, I didn't even know what genre it was going to be, even after the first 10 minutes. I was always on the edge of my seat, and my heart was racing in every scene. It had elements of all genres, from comedy to suspense to thriller. After the movie ended, I was speechless, and it even brought me to tears, and I still don't know why. The director successfully makes viewers feel like they are part of the movie and also gets a message across.
Is this a Korean movie?
Yes.
Did this win Best Picture this year?
Sure
Is
did.
it Parasite?
Yeah. Man.
You know what's funny, Christian? I'm working on our old reviews, and like I was trying to explain in 200 words like all the different genres that slammed together in that movie, and I almost had the exact like word for word like thriller comedy thing in there.
Oh man. Like I was scrolling through these today, and I was looking for something like at least somewhat vague for my first one, and every single 5-star review on here is basically just it's like its own little philosophical critique of everything. I'm like, these are so obvious.
Yeah. Nice. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Before we head out, Christian, what are you going to be checking out this week?
Well, I am not sure. I'm in the middle of a couple of TV shows right now. I'm not sure if I'm continuing them or not. The Invisible Man comes out this Friday. I definitely want to see that. I'm not sure what I'm expecting from it, but it definitely looks creepy. It's a much more like unsettling version of the Invisible Man than I'm used to seeing as like the goofy guy wrapped up in the bandages. This seems more like a psychological thriller. Like I said, I'm in the middle of Witcher still. I'm in the middle of Sex Education. I just finished the first season. It was really good. I'm debating whether I'm going to continue to the second season or not for a couple different reasons. But that's probably going to be about it for me this week.
I am not sure what I'm actually watching either. We still got to pick out a movie that both of us are going to watch for next week. I'm sorry, I'm probably not going to see Invisible Man. I think it looks horrible. I don't want to pay to watch that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm sure I would. I'm only watching it because it's not going to cost me anything.
Yeah. Otherwise, I started playing Rage 2, so I'm going to continue with that. Honestly, Bloodborne took up so much of my time. I'm going to try and catch up on backlog of doing some random work. So we'll see if that actually I'm successful in that or not. I am working through The Outsider, the HBO series, and it's really good. I think I have 4 episodes left to catch up on that. So maybe I'll talk about that.
That's definitely one I want to start as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's very slow, so it's like I can't watch more than 2 episodes at a time.
Yeah.
But those are the main things I'm going to be working on. All right, guys, thanks for checking out our episode. If you would like to contact us, you can reach us on email. We are gambots.blog@gmail.com, or on Twitter, we are @gambotsnetwork. We've also recently created a website. If you'd like to check out, our reviews are up there. And if you're listening somewhere where you can either rate or review, we'd appreciate it if you do so, as it would help us get some promotion out there. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Thank you.